Can you believe we're midway through 2021 already? The year is flying by and we'll reach the midpoint of the SACCS season later this month. But first, time for round 2 of the 2021 championship, the Sugarbelt 400, which took place late in May. All the action is proudly brought to you by Toyota Gazoo SA, Ural, Ford and Pirelli. With round 1 of the season done and dusted, it was time for the South African Cross Country Series to head to an area that hasn't hosted a race since 2015, the Sugarbelt 400. A return to the areas of Eston and Middelovo saw the series utilise a mix of rough gravel tracks and sugarcane fields, which promised to offer a stern challenge to all involved. Add to that some cold weather on race day, and it was soon clear that the 2021 Sugarbelt 400 would be anything but a pushover. But before we get to round 2, let's take a quick look at how things stacked up after round 1 of the series, the Mpumalanga 400. In Class FIA, it was Ford's Lance Woolridge who had drawn first blood, with rally driver Guy Bottrell in second place for TGRSA. Gareth Woolridge in the second new Class FIA Ford Ranger rounded out the top 3. Class T saw the Horns take the championship chase by the Horns, with Malcolm Cox slotting into second place and Christo Rose leading Vos Prinsloo in third. Clearly, a tough title chase was in the making. Over in Class A, Lance Woolridge and Tim Howes were the only point scorers at the opening round. Class G, however, saw an early battle developing, with Dean Bradbury taking the lead over Werner Mostert. Cecilani was into third place, whilst defending champion Nico Durant found himself down the rankings in 5th. So those were the numbers after round 1, but let's move on to the Sugarbelt 400. We caught up with some of the key players prior to the start in Eston, and possibly the biggest news was that TGRSA's Henk Lateghan was back in action after recovering from his shoulder surgery.
Yeah, no, it was a bit nerve-wracking getting to the car the first time at the test. I was very nervous about my shoulder, but so far so good.
He would have to keep an eye on his teammate Chanel de Villiers, however. De Villiers won the Sugarbelt back in 2001 and would be hunting for a repeat performance some 20 years later.
The only thing I can remember about the Sugarbelt is that it's a very hard race. There's no free kilometers here.
But one man who was sure to spoil the Toyota party was Lance Woolridge, who won the opening round of the season back in Mpumalanga.
I don't think necessarily it's going to be the fastest guy who wins here, although, you know, everyone's racing.
Johan Horn had drawn first blood in the Class T fight and was hoping to continue his winning ways, despite the unfamiliar terrain of the Sugarbelt.
It's a difficult race, but yeah, we're going to try our best.
Big Lance Trathuri has proven himself as a power competitor, setting highly competitive overall times as well. He dominated in Dahlstrom and was aiming for more of the same in Eston.
Sugarbelt's a great race. I mean, I think when you raced there last, we had a big dust with Evan, and we raced there for years on bikes in it, so I'm very, very happy to be back here.
In the Class G pack, it was Werner Mostert who would have his eyes on the top step of the podium, especially with Dean Bradbury, the winner of round 1, missing out on the action at Sugarbelt.
Sugarcane fields, I love it. I'm so looking forward to doing this event, and I'm hoping to bring the car back in one piece.
There was also a newcomer in the Class G Championship in the form of Jeff Minnett. Minnett has many races under his belt as a navigator, but decided to join the fray from behind the wheel, this time with Gerrie Prinsloo beside him.
I've been navigating since 2000, and I thought it's time to take up driving, and they brought out these side-by-sides over the last couple of years.
Other key players in Eston included Jason Fenter, who made a welcome return to the SACCS from behind the wheel of his fully refurbished Class FIA Toyota Hilux. Brother Dylan was also back campaigning a 4x4 Megawheel Toyota Hilux, this time in Class T.
It's been a while gone, but I'm looking forward to being back.
Chris Visser was also back in action after missing out on round 1 of the series. He'd have new navigator Nico Swartz reading the notes after Donnie Stassen partnered with Shamir Variawa now for the foreseeable future.
It's a pity Donnie is not with me anymore, but yeah, he's got other commitments, and I'm very glad for him, and I hope it's going very, very well in the future with him.
Teammate Gary Berthold also made a welcome return in a shiny new Class FIA Toyota Hilux. He would now have Siegfried Rousseau reading the notes and was looking forward to getting underway here at Eston.
Super excited, absolutely amped to go and drive this new Renogen Hilux out here in Sugarbelt.
It was almost go time in KZN, but before the flag could drop for the start, there were some final formalities to take care of. As has become tradition, the SACCS assists with the distribution of school shoes to children in the areas in which the races take place. And the Sugarbelt 400 was no exception.
So we thought, why not expand our horizons and involved in different activities in different parts of South Africa for our brand awareness.
The race also offered an opportunity for Mr. Dave Gurney, who has been involved with the race from its inception, to set the cars off for the ceremonial start. And with that, the cars set off for the Pirelli qualifying race, over a 50-kilometre route that started and finished at the DSP. It was tough going from the get-go, but this was just the jostling for start positions, which might be crucial over the 2 remaining race loops of 160 kilometres each, and which would follow on the Saturday of the race weekend. The battle at the head of the field quickly drew attention, with Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk, winners of the opening round of the championship, setting a time of 45 minutes and 1 second. But where the Ford Ranger crew emerged victorious in Dahlstrom, this time their pace didn't quite match the cars ahead. They had TGR-SA's Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy exactly 1 minute ahead of them. The former champions clearly relished the tough conditions, bringing their Toyota Hilux home in the second fastest time of the day. And the top spot in qualifying? Well, that went to none other than the flying Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings. The youngster's shoulder surgery seemed to be well and truly behind him, and he powered his Hilux to a winning margin of 1 minute and 15 seconds over his teammate, stamping his authority on the series after missing out on the opening round.
I was a little bit worried in the beginning, but towards the middle it started easing up or loosening up, and then it was becoming a lot of fun in the car. It was really enjoyable.
The lads from Malalan were clearly feeling frisky themselves, and brothers Johan and Werner Horn didn't hang around. Despite campaigning one of the older cars in the field, they powered their Poison Arrow to a resounding victory in Class T, and also going 4th fastest overall, besting many of the Class FIA cars in the process.
Yeah, we had a good run. I think Werner was excellent with the navigating.
They were followed home by Ford's Malcolm and Frans Koch in the NWM Ford Ranger, who had teammates Force Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen for company in 3rd. In the special vehicle category, it was another dominant performance by Lance Trethuri and Adrian Roots in the Skalkberger Motorsport Bat Venom. The pair romped to a Class A qualifying victory, besting their nearest rivals by 2 minutes and 39 seconds.
We had a good time trial. Adrian was good on notes. We have made one little mistake, but yeah, the marking is excellent, and I'm happy to be where we are.
Second place in the qualifier went to Tim Howes and Don Thompson in their Bat Spec 4, whilst John Thompson and Marisa Matten completed the qualifying podium in their Zarco Challenger. Finally, the fight in Class G has been heating up over the last few seasons and has now reached a fever pitch, with the top crews trading blows on a regular basis. Marco Himmel and Francois Schoonby in the Skalkberger Motorsport Sidey posted a time of 51 minutes and 29 seconds in qualifying, but that was only good enough for 3rd place. Second place this time went to Basil Besadenhout with Rickers Hutting in the Motonetics KEX racing sponsored machine, whilst Class G honours this time went to Theo Erasmus and Edward Odendahl in their Can-Am Maverick. So let's briefly recap those results from qualifying. In Class FIA, it was Ladergan and Cummings on top, with de Villiers and Murphy in 2nd and Woolridge and Vonk in 3rd. Class T saw the Horn brothers dominate, with the father and son pairing of Malcolm and Frans Koch in 2nd, and Prinsloo and Vermeulen taking 3rd. Trethuri and Roots were at the top of the Class A pile once again, with defending champions Tim Howes in 2nd, Thompson and Zamatten rounding out the top 3. And in Class G, Erasmus and Odendahl took their first ever pole position ahead of Besadenhout and Hutting and Himmel and Schoonby. And that wrapped up day 1 of the Sugarbelt 400, round 2 of the 2020 SACCS. Join us again shortly as we bring you all the action from the main event in KwaZulu-Natal, and boy, was it a cracker! Welcome back to the Beaumont Farmers Club near Eston, the home base for the famed Sugarbelt race that returned to this beautiful area after an absence of 6 years. Following the qualifying race the day before, it was pretty clear that the action on the day was going to be even hotter, though the cold front and low-lying mist that rolled in overnight added a little bit of extra flavour. It was an early start as always, with more than 40 cars in the various classes, each with a driver and navigator, all lined up to take the 8 o'clock start time. On the cards today, 2 identical loops of around 170 kilometers each. The crews were warned that conditions were going to be tough and that it would take a fair amount of time to cover the mileage. But no one told that to defending champions Henk Ladegan and Brett Cummings, who were off and into the sugarcane like a bat out of hell in the Toyota Gazoo SA Racing Hilux. He was followed by teammates Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy in the second Hilux, whilst an Italian, Lance de Thuy and Adrian Roots, started the race from third in the Skalkberger Motorsport, Bat Venom. One by one, with 2-minute gaps separating each team, they all set off in an effort to claim class as well as overall victory. This included the Class T leaders, Johan and Werner Horn in the Malalan Toyota Racing Hilux. Race 1 winners Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk in the Ford Castrol Cross Country Team Ranger, and veteran Chris Visser, now with new Navy Nico Swart in the hot seat. Then came another 2 Fords, the Class T1 driven by father and son Malcolm and Franz Koch, and the factory Ford of local driver Gareth Woolridge, who would have been second to take off on the race, but slipped down the order after receiving a 2-minute penalty for a minor infringement on the day before. After a few kilometres into the race, when a number of cars have passed the same point and the organisers manage to analyse the stopwatches, can one start to form a clear and accurate picture of what the standings are. And without any further ado, let's get straight into the details of what transpired during the tough battle for Class G honours. Remember, this is a battleground for both old and young to measure up their skills in a class that allows you to compete at national level without breaking the bank. But the route was tough, and several Class G cars were about to find out exactly how challenging it really was, such as class stalwarts and multiple champions Werner and Leon Mostert, who battled a number of niggles in their Skalkberger Motorsport Can-Am, while reaching the DSP in an unfamiliar 6th position. They were quite a few minutes behind veteran navigator but newcomer to the class as a driver, Jeff Minnett, who occupied 5th place alongside navigator Harry Prinsloo at the halfway mark. Basil Besaidenout and Rickers Hutting had their eyes set on a possible podium place here in Natal, but their Motonetics Can-Am completed the first half of the race around 6 minutes behind the fight for the Class G podium. And what a fight it was. Defending class champions Nico Durrance and JG Klaassen were having a tough battle with 2 18-year-old kids in the form of Kent Rutherford and Cabello Mokonyani. It was early days with half of the race still remaining, but after reaching DSP for a well-earned break, it was the young combination of Rutherford and Mokonyani with a slight advantage over the old dogs. But that was only for a provisional 2nd place, as Theo Erasmus and Edward Odendahl, who started the race from pole position, managed to extend their advantage at the front of the Class G field. Nerves of steel coupled with a fair share of driving skill is what you need to get one of these through the sugarcane lined roads. We are of course talking about the Mad Max monsters of cross-country racing, the big-engined rear-wheel drive machines of Class A and P in the special vehicle category. Gary and Jess Campbell were behind the wheel of the only Class P car in the race and still going strong. But unfortunately for lady racer Sandra Labiskakny-Jank and husband Jaco, they could not start the race due to mechanical problems in their Class A Tuscany Porter. The Zarco challenger of class stalwarts John Thompson and Marisa Matten did start, but failed to reach the halfway mark, leaving it up to defending champion Tim Howes and Navi Don Thompson to put their local knowledge to good use. But that didn't help the champion too much today. He ran into all sorts of difficulties, and although he reached the halfway mark, he was more than an hour behind the Farmers Meat striker of Louis Dupria and Tion Swart, who did well to fight their way through the field after starting way down the order. Someone else who also started way back was the Skalkberger Motorsport Porter driven by Bula Buertas and Jay Pretorius, who set a blistering pace throughout the first loop to climb the leaderboard all the way up to a provisional 3rd place in class. But he still had some ground to make up in order to try and catch the current 2nd place pairing of Clint Gibson and Alaric Smith, who themselves drove brilliantly to carve their way through the field after a problematic qualifying race the day before. But all of this was only for 2nd place, because the 2 guys at the front of the Class A field were quite literally in a class of their own. Former champions Lance Strathuri and Adrian Rutz, now under the Skalkberger Motorsport banner, qualified in pole and never looked back after the flag drop.
It's been very, very slippery this lap. Obviously it rained further out there, so we have been battling with a bit of traction in that, but otherwise it's good, So, and it's nice to see all the local people and shouting for us, and that's great.
Here's confirmation of the special vehicle standings after the Friday qualifying race and the first of Saturday's 2 racing loops at the Sugarbelt 400. In Class G, it's Theo Erasmus with an advantage over youngster Kent Rutherford and Nico Durant taking third. The Campbells owned Class P, and in Class A, Huertas found himself on a provisional podium just behind Clint Gibson and Trathui, showing everyone a clean pair of heels out front. Those were the standings as far as the open wheelers go, but now it's time to move on to the tin tops and the various battles between the Fords, Toyotas and Redline VK machines, as well as the Century CRs in Classes T and FIA. Let's start with Class T and the ones that were setting a blistering pace at the top. Someone or something has blown new life into the aging old Hilux and its occupants, because the brothers from Malalan were flying during round 1 and were doing the same here on the Sugarbelt. Their current lead over the second Class T car, the Neil Woolridge Ford Ranger, driven by father and son Malcolm and Franz Koch, was around 5 minutes, and Koch is no slouch either. There was a little daylight between the Kochs and the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux of Dylan Fenter and Donovan Lubber, who returned to National Championship racing after an absence of around 2 years. The young Fenter only had a slight advantage over yet another NWM Ford Ranger, this one being expertly driven by the popular Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen. Prinsloo did well considering his steed had almost no brakes, not what you need in the mountains and hills of KZN. Class T has become the home of several NWM Fords, as the next one to reach the DSP was the Ranger of Christo Rose and Arno Olafia, whilst the other Class T debutant crew of Bapi Rabaluzu and Fani Maiwa would have been ecstatic to reach the halfway marker. But Class T was all about the Horn brothers from Malalan, Johan and Werner. Here's Johan's take on the first part of the race, which he described as pretty tough.
Yeah, it was a tough race. I haven't had a tough race like this in a long time.
And these are the cars in the Premier FIA class, which has really become a worldwide window into the expertise, quality of workmanship and competitiveness that we as South Africans have in this country. They include Toyotas, Renault Dusters and Redline VK56s built near Kyalami, the Century Racing buggies from Fourways and the Fords from Maritzburg. It results in one heck of a competitive environment. So to make it into the local class FIA scoreboard takes some doing. The Century CR6 of Mark Corbett and Rodney Burke were beaten to the halfway mark by the Redline Motorsport VK56 of Conrad Rautenbach and Rian Kreiling by a mere 5 seconds, with the brand new FIA Toyota Hilux of Gary Berthold and Siegfried Rousseau a further 2 minutes up the road, and currently occupying 5th position in class. Chris Visser was in the current 4th position and just over a minute behind a provisional podium, but the Northwest farmer and businessman, with new navigator Nico Swartz, found the going tough. The pairing even rolled their Hilux in the sugarcane, but managed to continue after it luckily landed back on its wheels. A broken windscreen didn't help with visibility either, as well as the Hilux doing a few extra miles as they went slightly off route. This meant that Brian Baragwanath and Leonard Kramer fought their way back from a less than perfect qualifying session the day before to reach the halfway mark in 3rd in the hotly contested FIA class from behind the wheel of their Century Racing CR6. This once again left us with the battle between the factory Ford Castrol Cross Country Racing Rangers and the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux teams for overall honours. Ford landed the first punch when their new Ranger won on debut 2 months ago, but their luck was about to turn here on their home race. As with any new car, the Rangers developed a teething problem or two. In this case, it was an induction pipe under the bonnet of the Ranger that brought an end to Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vogt's race as they were forced to retire, while a similar problem was also hampering Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer's progress.
We'll get the car back and inspect it, but yeah, a bit of a frustrating weekend.
With the two Fords not posing a threat anymore, there was no doubt about who was leading the race. At first, people were worried about Henk Ladegan's fitness, as this was his first outing since injuring his shoulder at Dakar 5 months ago. but the double champion and navvy Brett Cummings showed no mercy to Lautachan's shoulder or the tough conditions. Lautachan had, however, no choice, because although they are teammates, veteran driver Janelle de Villiers and co-driver Dennis Murphy were just as eager to add another win to their tally of many victories over the years. But at the halfway mark, it was advantage Lautachan.
The Sugarbelt's a very tough race, and it proved it once again.
We had a good morning so far. It's really tight and technical and rough. Body's taking a bit of strain, but still all right. My shoulder's hanging in there.
There's the confirmation of Lautachan's name at the very top of the leaderboard, followed by his teammate de Villiers and Baragwanath taking third. The Horns were comfortably Class T leaders ahead of the Cox and Dylan Fenter. After a quick break for both man and machine, it was time to head out into the sugarcane and surrounding areas one more time, and this is how it panned out. It was Basil Besadenhout and Rickers Hutting who scored a career best finish by claiming the final step of the podium in Class Gs. And speaking of a career best result, the same could be said for the two 18-year-olds who finished second on this tough event. Ken Rutherford and Cabello Mokinyani brought their Can-Am Maverick safely home after enjoying a trouble-free event. They crossed the finish line with a time less than 2 minutes slower than eventual race winners Nico Durant and JG Claassen. The former champions were relieved to step onto the top step of the podium for the first time in 2021 to start their title defence.
I thought, well, let's keep it calm, bring the car home and we'll pay off, and they did. I'm happy.
To finish first you must finish, which is precisely what Gary and Jess Campbell did to secure a Class P honours win. And what a great podium for relative newcomers to the sport, Bula Buertas and Jay Pretorius, who were last off the line early in the morning. The Skalkberger Motorsport crew fought their way through the entire field to record a first ever podium finish, whilst local lads Clint Gibson and Alaric Smith recovered well to claim second spot on this very tough event and their first taste of podium champagne for 2021. But not even two flat tyres and issues with the jack could prevent the big man Lance Trethuri and his little navigator from dominating yet again and claiming their second victory in as many races. The man really is quick.
But that's racing. We're here, we're happy, and Audrey did a great job today on the notes.
So another win for Big Lance in the special vehicle category ahead of Gibson, with Durant taking his first win of the season ahead of the youngster Kent Rutherford. Let's now turn our attention to the proceedings in Class T of the production vehicle category, where NWM's Bapi Raluzu did a fantastic job to reach the finish on one of the toughest events on the calendar in only his first ever outing on the race vehicle. Up ahead, the 4x4 Mega World Hilux of Dylan Fenter missed out on a podium finish narrowly by claiming fourth place, sometime behind the NWM Ford Racing Rangers of Vos Prinsloo, who took third and the final podium spot. And that with faulty brakes. In his own words though, brakes only make you go slower. Someone who went a little faster this time around was Malcolm Koch, who drove a superb race to reach the end of the feared Sugarbelt race in a fine second position for the class. But there was nothing that anyone could do to stop the fierce onslaught of the brothers from Malalan. Johan and Werner did not put a foot wrong. Pole position on the Friday and two perfect loops on Saturday saw them emerge as comfortable victors from a tough and demanding race.
It was a tough race. Evan gave us a good route, a real off-road race.
And finally, let's see how it turned out in the Class 4 FIA vehicles. Unfortunately, Gareth Woolridge had to retire his Ranger with the same problems that ended Brother Lance's race earlier, leaving it up to the Red Line cars and Century buggies, as well as the Toyotas, to battle for class and overall honours. Gary Berthold's new Hilux ended 6th in class, only 1 single second behind the red-lined VK56 driven by Zimbabwean Konrad Rautenbach. Chris Visser crossed the line in 4th, something that did not sit too well with the Northwest farmer. Around 2 minutes separated him from a Class FIA podium, with a third step this time going to Brian Baragwanath, who enjoyed an eventful race that even included rolling over at some point, but recovering to reach the finish and claim a good haul of championship points. This meant that the winner would be one of these two, Toyota Gazoo Racing SA teammates Henk Lautachan and Janelle de Villiers. But which one? Well, the odds were heavily stacked in Lautachan's favour, as he held a fairly comfortable lead over his teammate going on to the final loop. but in cross-country motorsport racing, nothing can be described as comfortable. Latekan was blisteringly quick and showed no problems with his injured shoulder until they picked up a puncher. The pair were a little slow to change the flat wheel, and as they were nearing the end, the engine started to overheat as well, forcing the champion to nurse the car home. This allowed the wily old Neil de Villiers to sneak through and take his second consecutive victory at the Fiat Sugarbelt race, albeit exactly 2 decades after his previous win. This is what the production vehicle scoreboard looked like after 400 kilometers of tough racing in KZN. De Villiers claimed the win ahead of his teammate Latekan, and Brian Baragwanath was solid in third. For Class T's, the Horns were dominant once again ahead of the Cox, with Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen solid in third, a great drive with their problems. Trophy time for the victors, with De Villiers not too unhappy about surviving this incredible race.
Very happy with the win, and I think for Toyota also a 1-2 with Henk second is really great results for us.
Next up, it's the return of the famous Toyota 1000 Desert Race. It's the big one on the calendar for 2021, and this classic race will be contested in the Kalahari area around the Northern Cape city of Uppington. All the action was proudly brought to you by Toyota Gazoo Racing, Ural, Ford and Pirelli.